stylish
Hey everyone, I'm Belle Reid and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about Fairfield Circuitry's newest pedal, Roger That, which is a super gnarly distortion-like effect that's inspired by the noisy artifacts of radio technology. Special thanks to Fairfield for sending me one of these to check out and for thinking that I would love all of the crazy sounds that it makes, because you were right, and I do love them. Being able to spend some time with this pedal prior to its release has been a really inspiring experience for me. For one, its means of manipulating sound are super unique. And also, getting the chance to explore all of that without the context of what anyone else is doing with the pedal has been really interesting. I know that that's a rare opportunity, so I really appreciate the chance to be able to dive into all of this from a completely blank slate. So with all of that in mind, today I'm going to be sharing some of the things that I have been recently trying out with Roger That. If you're new to my channel, I am a trumpet player and I do a lot of work with electronics, and in particular, a lot of work combining trumpet and electronics together. So this video is mostly going to look at things that fall beyond the more traditional use case of plugging in a guitar, and instead are going to look at using Roger That in other contexts as an acoustic instrument processor and as an experimental sound design tool. If you're interested in picking up a Roger That of your own, there's an affiliate link in the description of this video, and anything that you purchase using that link is a big help to my channel. Okay, so with all of that said, let's dive in. What is Roger That? And how does it work? Roger That is inspired by the weird, noisy interactions that result from suboptimally tuned radio technology. You might classify this as a type of fuzz or distortion type effect, but you might sooner understand its sonic character by turning a dial on an analog radio and hearing all of those unusual sidebands, artifacts, and signal degradation that evolve as you slowly turn the tuning knob.
So, the next thing
This pedal lets you turn any sound into that. And it can also make sound on its own, which we'll definitely explore in a little while. But first, let's take a quick look at the panel to understand all of the controls. The simplest part of this pedal are these three knobs here: dry, wet, and drive. The drive control is the gain on a JFET preamp, so when it's pushed, it can get really noisy and crunchy all on its own. The wet and dry controls are fairly self-explanatory, but it's important to know that these are both affected by the drive circuit. So by turning the wet signal all the way down, you can still use this as a kind of gritty overdrive. But by turning the wet signal up, we can tap into some of the more unique aspects of the pedal. The remainder of the controls are dedicated to exploring these very non-linear radio-like effects. They all work in tandem to define the pedal's behavior, and as such, pinpointing precisely what each thing does can be a bit tricky. The most profound effects come from the tune control. Sonically, adjusting the tune control feels somewhat like adjusting the tuning on an analog radio. As you turn it, all sorts of peculiar artifacts crop up along the way. The switch labeled R affects the range of the tune control. The manual describes these as normal range when it's switched down to 1 and extended range when it's switched to 2. And indeed, these two ranges sound pretty different, so let's take a quick listen. The shift control is tightly interrelated with the tune parameter, and in Fairfield's words, this affects the accuracy of tracking the incoming signal. The effect can change a lot depending on your specific combination of tune and shift settings. So again, it's a bit difficult to pin down exactly what part of the tone is affected by each of these. Generally, it seems like tune has this more radio tuner-like effect, whereas shift almost feels more like a dirty filter or tone control at times. The F switch activates a bandpass filter for the wet output, fixed to a range of 300 Hz to 3 kHz. This can significantly contribute to the radio-like sonic qualities. That choice of reduced bandwidth is a quick and easy way of getting to that particular sound. It's important here to also note that the phase of the wet output is inverted with respect to the dry output. So finding a balance between these can help you bring more or less focus to the noisy, messed up radio artifacts versus your original tone. Keeping this in mind with respect to the bandpass filter, it also means that you can create a number of different filtering effects just by turning the filter on and finding a balance between the dry and wet controls. All right, so that's an overview of what everything here does. But it's worth stressing that this pedal's behavior is super unpredictable in a good way. It reacts very differently in response to different types of sounds, and it reacts very differently depending on the exact combination of all of the various settings. So I think the best way to get a feel for its character is to listen to a bunch of different examples. So from here on out, we're going to listen to some demos of Roger That in a number of different contexts. So one of the first things I noticed whenever I got this pedal is that it will make sound all on its own without needing to plug anything into its input. And it turns out that it can create a huge range of super dynamic sounds and textures. So I wanted to start here exploring Roger That as an instrument all on its own. Let's listen to some of the stuff it does when you mess with various parameters. Another cool thing here is that there is an external control voltage input for the tune parameter. That's fairly uncommon on guitar pedals, but it means that it's compatible right out of the box with any given control voltage source. So if you're into modular synths, there's a lot that you can do with this. Let's try combining Roger That with a Make Noise Zero control, which is a touch keyboard and sequencer, to see what kinds of sounds we can make. Another thing that I've been having a lot of fun exploring is using Roger That in feedback patches. So here I am inserting Roger That into a feedback loop with the hors d'oeuvre pedal by Fairfield Circuitry, which is an active feedback loop pedal. Here's one more example of a feedback patch with Roger That. And for this one, I am patching out from the hors d'oeuvre pedal into the Fairfield Circuitry Randy's Revenge. This is a ring modulator. And then from Randy's Revenge into Roger That. And then from there back into hors d'oeuvre to complete the feedback loop. One thing that I'm finding really interesting about working with this pedal so far is just how much range there is in terms of sonic character and texture as you adjust various parameters. I also personally really enjoy how non-linear the controls are, especially the tune and shift knobs. Knobs on most pedals have a fairly linear response, from low to high, for example, or from dry to wet, or dark to bright, and so on. But I'm noticing that on this pedal, instead of a predictable linear response, these controls seem to have entire little sonic neighborhoods within them, and adjusting something even by a millimeter in either direction can yield some really interesting results. You might think that this would make the pedal harder to use, but from my perspective, it actually opens up a new mode of interacting with and listening to things. Instead of simple controls, these knobs become very performable parameters. And the fact that the response is somewhat unpredictable, to me anyway, feels like an invitation to really be present in the moment with the instrument and to listen deeply. In this example, I'm using Strega, which is a semi-modular synth made by Make Noise, and I've got the zero control touch plate controller and sequencer pulled up again. I'm running the audio output from Strega into Roger That as a sound source, and I'm also using the zero control as a control voltage source and running that into the tune parameter. I'm going to start off with the pedal bypass so we can hear just what's happening on the Strega, and then I will engage the pedal so we can hear the effect as well. Awesome. So that sounds pretty great. But the Strega is already a pretty grungy, noisy sounding synth. So let's hear what Roger That sounds like with something a little bit cleaner going in as a sound source. For this example, I'm using the Hydrasynth, which is a polyphonic keyboard synthesizer. I was curious to hear what it would sound like with synthesizer chords run through Roger That. So as I was doing before, I'm going to start with just the Hydrasynth on its own, and then I will engage Roger That so we can hear the effect. Here's another patch example using the Hydrasynth with Roger That. So in this patch, I have a very simple repeating sound on the Hydrasynth, and with each new note that we hear, I'm also sending out a new random voltage from the Hydrasynth into the tune control on Roger That. So let's take a listen. So for the next few examples, I wanted to explore how Roger That responds to acoustic sound sources. So I'm going to start off with my trumpet. I know we listened to some trumpet loops earlier on, but I haven't yet actually tried playing live into Roger That with the trumpet, so I was curious to give that a try. Awesome. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to add one more pedal into the mix here, which is the WMD Protostar. So I'm going to run the trumpet sound completely dry through this pedal. I'm not going to add any extra processing, but the reason why I'm using it is because it has a built-in envelope follower, which I'm going to use to modulate the tune control on Roger That. So for this last example, I wanted to try using this really interesting percussion instrument that I have, which is called the Micro Marvin, made by Morph Beats. So to start off, I'm going to play this dry so you can hear its sound all on its own. Then I am going to engage Roger That and run it through there so we can hear the effect. And then finally, I am going to connect the envelope follower output from the Protostar into Roger That to modulate the tune control. Okay, awesome. So far, we've really been looking at using Roger that in isolation. But of course, if you're working with pedals, you're probably using more than one. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to share some different pedal pairings that I've found particularly interesting with Roger that. And hopefully this will inspire you to experiment a bit on your own. All right, awesome. So we've looked at a whole bunch of different ways of using Roger That in a number of different musical contexts. I really loved putting together this video because it felt like at every different turn, there was something new to discover about this pedal. I mentioned earlier that the nonlinearity of the shift and tune knobs on Roger That make those feel more like interactive performative nodes than like more traditional linear controls. And in my opinion, that's really what makes this pedal super unique. I also love the fact that this pedal can be used to process external sound sources, or it can stand alone and be used as an instrument all on its own. Just a reminder that there are affiliate links in the description of this video that you can use if you want to pick up a Roger That pedal of your own. Anything that you purchase using those links helps to support my channel so I can continue to make videos like this one. And if you're interested in joining an amazing community of people who are passionate about things like experimental sound and electronic music and modular synthesis, or if you're interested in behind the scenes content and unreleased music, then I invite you to check out my Patreon community, which is patreon.com/Sarah Belle Reid. All right, that's it for today. As always, thank you so much for watching and for listening, and I'll see you next time.